Hey everyone, welcome to A Great Alternative. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this random weave backpack. I'll get into why I'm knelt on the floor in a minute, but first, foraging materials. Most of my materials have been foraged between December and around March. This is the best time to harvest a lot of things like willow, hazel, stuff like that, because they're in their dormant stage, so you're not damaging the plant. Plus, if you coppice at this time of year, by this time next year, it will have grown a whole load of new shoots that'll be perfect for weaving again. If you have access to a farm or you can grow yourself, brilliant, but right now I don't. My materials have come from wild public spaces, most of them being either hedgerows, where they're going to be cut anyway, and I just get in there and take a few little handfuls here and there from the entire hedgerow, so you wouldn't have even noticed. Or they're the edges of woodlands. So luckily there's thousands of acres of woodlands around me, and a lot of the time on the edges of those, so next to the path, there's things like willow and hazel growing. Generally, what I do is by going out with Echo and just getting out there, just walking these different places and different pathways, I get to know the areas, also get to know when things, a tree's fallen or something's happened, or at this time of year, winter time, when things are being cut back. And therefore I can see what I can forage without either damaging the plant or taking something that's going to be used for another purpose by the landowner. A lot of the stuff that you see around me here is things that were literally just taken off by someone going down the side of a pathway with some kind of huge machinery and just ripping a lot of it out. And also that brings me on to, if you're doing a project like today where you need weaving and extremely pliable material like willow, then just get out there and see what works. Do the wrist test. Willow's perfect for this. Dogwood, hazel can be quite good. Silver birch. There's lots of different things out there that are great for weaving material. So don't just think, oh, I can only use basket weaving material. There's so much out there. Get out there, enjoy foraging, exploring, because that's the best bit. For me now, going outside into the woodland is kind of like being a kid in a candy store. Like, I can just, it's just the possibilities of all these different things and different shapes and textures and things that can be used in different projects is part of the fun. So yeah, don't go to a shop and buy it, go and forage it for yourself. Again, I want to stress I'm not an expert, so don't just take my word for it. Please do research. So for example, if you start to know about willow and hazel, then watch some willow videos, read some books, and go out there and try and learn for yourself about the material, best time to harvest, things to look out for, and also how best to forage sustainably. But without further ado, let's get started. Materials for today's project. I am going to be making this up as I go along, so you're kind of learning and going on this journey with me. But my plan currently is dogwood, which has come from actually where we live in right now. I have willow. This is probably about half the thickness of a pencil. And then I did do a test with this the other day. Let's just quickly see. Passes the wrist test. This was harvested a few weeks ago, so it's semi-green, which means it will dry and therefore shrink a little bit as it dries. So that's something to bear in mind. However, with a random weave project, I've generally found that that style of weaving is a lot more forgiving if you're using green or semi-green materials, because when it shrinks, the random weave nature almost holds some of that strength. Plus, with a random weave project, you can always go back and fill it in, because you're not going to fill in every single possible hole like you would with a regular basket, which therefore means if you did want to put some stuff in later on, so 6 months, a year down the line, and you want to put in some more material to strengthen it back up again, you can do so. We also have some birch here and some hedgerow hazel. Now, I won't lie, I don't think we're probably going to use much of this. Let's do a quick test of the hazel. See, so little less than pencil thickness, and this is snapping already. Hazel isn't as pliable as willow, dogwood, and silver birch that I've got here. So therefore, I think for today's project, actually, we're going to leave that one out. In regard to the tools that you need, if you want, pair of gloves. These are super cheap and have become probably my most prized tool, is these couple of quid gloves. with rubber on one side because that's really handy sometimes when you need a little bit of grip on, especially with wet or green materials. Plus they're thin, so you have the dexterity. And generally I've found if you're doing a project and you're weaving for sort of 6-8 hours, it's just better on your fingers, it's better on your hands. Next, pair of secateurs. These are super cheap ones. I actually need to sharpen these aren't that great. But for a project like today, for random weave projects, that's actually something you don't have to have, other than if you've cut the material already, like I have right now. I technically don't need any tools whatsoever. So the only reason why I might use secateurs is if I want to either clean up the end or right at the very end when I just want to clean up the entire basket and get rid of any scraggly bits. But the idea of random weave is that you tie all those in. Right, that's everything. Let's get started. So this is a random weave technique that I've only tried once before, and it's a way of not having to create the sort of structure first. For example, if you've seen my random weave shopping basket, I create circles which become the handles and the shape of the basket, and then you basically fill it in. This is a slightly different method. You get your handful of sticks. I've got, I don't know how many here, doesn't really matter. Hold them out in front of you and you let go. That's it. Does it look like a basket yet? Next, you get your stick that is on the bottom of what will be the basket, and then just start weaving. What I've found is if you can quickly go in circles and go under and over and under and over as much as you possibly can, as quickly as you can, that helps out massively. Now, in the book that I read, they said this would be good to either stand on or have weights on. I'm going to attempt it for this video, for the B-roll, and for this shot here, to try and do it so that you can see what I'm doing, but that might not go so well, so we'll see, we'll see. Because this dogwood is quite fresh, I'm not tempering it first. Tempering it would mean if I was kind of doing this and bending it first to kind of get the fibers bending the way that I'm going to put them into the basket. But what I'm doing here is over, under, as quickly as possible. It's easier, I will say, if you had 2 feet on, but I think, let's see, that's going to look, oh, am I not, no, can you see? Oh yeah, you can see a little bit. And I would say at this stage as well, do not worry, it is going to be a mess. It's going to look like a mess, and you're going to be like, what am I creating? What is this nonsense? But don't worry. Do not worry. Still trying to not be too harsh. So for example, on this curve here, I could feel that it was starting to want to kink here. So you're still just tempering it a little bit if you need to, because this is slightly thicker, this bit. And sometimes I find if you put pressure in the weak spot. So for example, if you can feel that it's weak here, then I'd kind of hold it there and support it there and sort of move it slowly and try and move it kind of in an equal way across the entire piece of weaver. Ideally at this stage you want to end up with kind of like a plate. Bear in mind how big you want your base, because you don't want to get too much bigger than that at the moment. You can always again take stuff out or bend things in a bit more, but you want to be wary of that at this stage. Okay, I have my rough base. My aim is that what I want to do, the reason that I've chosen dogwood to start with and just dogwood is because I'm hoping that I could go from red to kind of dark browns of either possibly the silver birch, still not certain I'm going to use that or not, or whether I'll just go with the willow. So go from reds to browns to maybe even greens of willow, and I have an idea for how to finish it off at the moment, but I'll get to that in a bit. Now, you've got your plate. Obviously, there's probably still quite a lot of gaps. You could fill that in a little bit if you want to, but I wouldn't necessarily at this stage, because it's best to kind of get the rough shape and build up as you go, rather than filling in too much and then realizing, oh, I can't actually like bend it into the shape that I want now. So for today, we're making a backpack. So that is not far off. If you can see the kind of rough shape, that's not far off the size of the base of the backpack that I want. This could come in a little bit more, and then obviously there's bits sticking out here that need to come up. But other than that, I'm pretty happy. So next, I have finished the dogwood for now, so that's why I'm going to start putting in willow. I think I will put in dogwood, more dogwood later on, but for now I'm going to start feeding in the willow. Quick side note, another reason why I'm here today. I have been doing some videos recently where I go out into the woods and just weave in the beautiful Welsh woodlands, but today it's chucking it down. So another reason that we're in the shed. Hopefully in future there'll be more videos of me weaving out in beautiful locations rather than in here, but for now, let's crack on. So, same as before, continue weaving randomly, but what I'm going to be doing now is starting to try and create the structure and create the sides. So every so often, with a few of the pieces that I put in, I'll want to leave, for example, something like this. So I know that I want to have a side. I know I'm not necessarily going up to the full height yet, because you want to do that slowly. You slowly build up. And you always want to be curving. The top bit doesn't want to be a bit sticking out like this. It wants to be a curving bit like this here. But you're still trying to make it stay in place. So obviously you still need to weave it in and out quite a few times. Other than that, it's just build it up every so often. Take a step back, have a look at it. If you need to either push things in or bend things around at this stage, not so much. But if you need to, that's absolutely fine. And generally, this is where you're starting to build that shape and structure. So that's where you are needing to kind of constantly think about what it is that you want the end result to be. However, my favorite part about random weave basketry is you can kind of let things flow and develop and change and evolve as the project goes on. So right now, I've got a rough idea for a backpack. Is the backpack going to be flat on one side, really curvy on the other side, and big fat bit at the front? I don't know. Is it going to end up being quite straight all the way up? I'm not sure. Is it going to go up at an angle? I'm not sure. So I'm just going to kind of have those ideas in mind, but not be super rigid into what exactly this has to be, because there might be times where the material itself will kind of tell you the way in which it wants to go. Before I crack on and we do this as a time lapse, one more piece of advice: if you are weaving, sometimes it's easier to get the thicker end and kind of sew it in to the shape. That will start you off, and then you can use the thinner bits to sew from there. Rather than, for example, starting at the thinner end and then you're doing everything with the thick end, which it might not necessarily want to do, or might kink or snap a little bit easier. I'm going to continue working on the floor for now, partly because I don't have a table in here as of yet. You don't have to be doing this on the floor. Much easier to do on the table, so it might cut in a little bit to me on a seat because yeah, already my legs and my back's starting to hurt a little bit. Getting old. Okay, continue. Okay, we've reached a stage where we're starting to fill up the sides. I'm learning, the more you practice and the more you work with different materials, you realize how to hold things together, how to sculpt and how to kind of manipulate the structure in the way that you want. I'm still very much learning. At this stage, it looks like a mess still, but we are getting the shape there. In essence, we've got the kind of oval, that's going to be the base. Every so often, I'm pressing it against my knee to just bring it in a little bit. And then one side's going to be flatter than the other, and the other three sides are going to curve up. For now, I'll just be continuing with this, building up and building up and building up, right up until the point where I get to as high as I want the basket to be. And once I've reached that point, then it'll be a case of just filling everything in and making the structure strong. Like most random weave projects, as the rain gets worse outside, I'm just going to stick a podcast on and keep weaving. Okay, because I'm in the shed, I'm running off my filmmaking lights, which is why I got that one bright light right there, off batteries. They've both just died. So I'm going to take this inside, continue weaving, and when I come back, hopefully I'll have a lot more done. Right, so I had planned to come up to the top of this hill and do some more filming because the rain stopped. I got up here, it's not stopped yet. I have faith that it will go away as the day goes on. I've got a good 4 or 5 hours of daylight left, so hopefully we'll go over there in a bit. But this gives me a perfect opportunity to give you an update of where I am and just kind of clarify what I've been doing to get to this point. As you can see, I probably am nearing the top now. But the main things that I'm focusing on at the moment, as you're building, as you can see, this shape has kind of come in a little bit. What happened is, as I was building this last night, it wants to go a certain way. And the ways that you can tie it in and tell it to go back to the way you want is either you could tie it by literally just getting a piece of string and tying it in. Or, as you can see in this example here, what I did was I basically squeezed it all together, held it in the place that I wanted, and then used a piece of willow to tie it in like this. As well as that, keep taking a step every, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 things that you put in, take a step back. Is it the shape that you want? If not, maybe get your knee and kind of squeeze it against your knee a little bit. So for example, if you can see that there, I've got a nice curve on this side. This will be the front. I'm trying to get a nice flat back. If anything, I might try and put a little bit of a curve in the middle of this one, and this is going to be what's against my back. Same as the bottom. This, again, when I started, was very oval. To be honest, I've made baskets like that. It's a backpack. It doesn't have to sit flat, but I'd like this one to sit flat. So that's why I come in and squeeze it like this with my knee and just push down. Again, if you wanted to step away from this project for a day or so, you could always tie it in place. So tie it with it squeezed in the shape that you want, or you can use a former of some kind, you know, a piece of wood, or some people might even roll up some newspaper, cover it in sellotape and stick that in and you form it around that. Overall, this is where you get to kind of be flexible and see what works for you. So it's just a case of having the rough idea of the end result that you want and just as you go, generally keeping it into that shape. So while we wait for the rain to clear, I'm going to continue with the basket sat in the shelter of the woodland here. So this is the part of the process that I recommend to anyone. If you have an outdoor space near you, that might be your garden, it might be a local park, or if you're like myself, it might be a large public woodland or countryside area like this. I really love it because it's a way of kind of connecting back to the wild materials that you're weaving with. Plus, it's just a beautiful place to be, to sit. I like to, every so often, for at least a part of the basket making process, come out to a place like this and just be in nature and, yeah, take my time. Let it kind of relax me and continue making something that's come from this hillside that I'm on right now, and hopefully will continue and be a backpack that will help me on foraging journeys into the future. For now though, this beautiful Welsh countryside is going to be my backdrop while I continue weaving in the rest of this bundle into this basket. Okay. glue just come out. Oh, I filled it in a bit more. I am at a stage that I could stop there. This is pretty much a finished basket, but I want to challenge myself. And also I want to try out a few different methods to just really make this something that I'm going to be proud of. The few things that I'm going to try are, firstly, I want to go from this lovely red of the dogwood to the kind of maroon browns of the willow and then the greens of the willow. So to do that, there's a few little bits, for example, like here, there's bits of green that I put in earlier on that I'm going to have to take out and put back at the top. Secondly, I love random weave baskets that are nice and thick and full, just for a few different reasons, really. It creates a kind of stronger structure, but also it's just nice. I like it. That's it. Simple, I like it. You don't have to do that, but I am going to continue. And also it's something to note that I have generally found that you end up putting between 2 and 3 times the amount of material into a basket when you make it really full using the kind of random weave method, rather than making a basket of a similar size using a standard templated method. So bear that in mind, it will take a lot longer, but yeah, I love it, so why not? Thirdly, I'm going to go around and either snip off any bits that are stuck out if I can't sort of weave them back in. And there's little bits, for example, this little bit here, where I used it to tie things together at an earlier stage. It's now sticking out of the basket and I don't really like it. It looks a bit forced, basically. And obviously the idea with these is they don't feel forced, they feel natural and flowing. So I'm going to cut that out, or I'm going to just take it out and weave it back in at a different point. Like I mentioned before, I'm still always having a curve at this bit here. It's always coming up, and I'm putting in more and more and more as I can to try and get as close to a flat surface and a thick flat surface at the top here, so that when we come to the next stage, because I plan to put in a border, it's not like this here, for example. It's not just big gaps that are a bit loose and not very strong. Other than that though, just continue. Enjoy the view. Okay, here we go. So, pretty happy with this so far. I mean, this could be done. So, to go on an example of my basket number 1, this is more, I think, of body proportions for someone that's a little bit smaller than me, because it feels like it's a bit tight. I've got this so that it kind of fits nicely on me. However, it sits a little high. The straps are just charity shop finds. I couldn't believe that I found 2 of the exact same, and I've got another one here that has this kind of beautiful weave pattern to it. So the end result is going to be something like this. However, I wanted to add a border to this one for 2 reasons. Firstly, when I'm grabbing it, I want something kind of thicker to grab. So for example, like this one here, or these, you know, this, it's just having a kind of structural, strong kind of border to the edges just would be nice as just something to grab when I'm picking it up like this. Secondly, I love, and I'm really happy with how this gradient has come out. And I think something that is this spruce root kind of color, which will end up being a little bit lighter than this, but I think I love that color, and I think that'll really add just an extra element to it, going from the red to the dark browns to the greens and then to this kind of lighter tanned kind of color. Just, yeah, love that. So what I'd like to do is add a border. First of all, from this angle, before we go into actually creating the border, I just want to show you some examples of different borders that you can use. First up, what was that? First up, just to explain kind of what a border is. Normally on a basket, you have your base, then these uprights get stuck into the base, bent over or kinked over, and then you weave up along the side until you get to the height that you want to. Then this becomes part of the border. This is then what's woven around and becomes part of the border. There are lots of different types of border that you can use. Super simple border, like this one, is pretty much with every single upright, it just goes behind one and down, and that's pretty much it. This is a slightly more complicated one, and you can see ends up with a fairly thin border as the example. A much thicker border would be something like this one here. This is a plaited border. Both this one and this one I did actually on a course with a basket weaver named Jane Welsh, who I'll be doing some projects with about how to make one of these. Also, this was a practice border. So with Peggy Beer, who you may have seen in other videos, we just kind of made it up and was like, okay, well, should we sort of go to the outside or the inside? And just kind of made it up. And I'm really happy with how that ended up. It sort of has a really nice flow to it. But one thing I learned on this, and a big piece of advice I would give to yourselves, is especially when you're a beginner and you're not trying to get things absolutely perfect, or like in this case, if you're not using a material that is uniform, so for example, you know, basket weaving willow compared to what I'll be doing today, which is spruce root, which isn't necessarily, it can get thick and thin and have gnarls in it and stuff like that. If you are using materials like that, don't worry too much about being absolutely perfect. As long as you continuously do the same thing, it doesn't matter what you do. So for example, if you go behind one and in front of one, and then you do that on every single upright, and then that continues round, then just keep doing that. If you go in front of 4 and behind 2, again, as long as you continue that all the way around, then that's absolutely fine. Today, that's what we're going to do. I've skipped ahead for one main reason. Through the rambling and mistakes and playing and increasing cold, basically last night I filmed for like 3 hours, and it definitely doesn't need to be 3 hours of video. So I'm just going to recap how I put the border on. Firstly, I collected all the spruce root that I had at the moment. If you haven't seen, because I didn't mention it earlier on, about harvesting spruce root, I have actually made a video about harvesting spruce root, which you can view here. Once I had all the spruce root, I then roughly measured the distance I would need to weave into the basket, leaving enough out the top to weave into the border, which was about 1.5 feet. If you wanted to do this bit properly, you would measure the circumference of your basket rim, then work out what the distance between the uprights needed to be, depending on how many you want. But I just fancied winging it. I started by measuring 4 fingers distance between each upright, weaving as I went, and as luck would have it, the last gap was pretty much, although don't look too closely, the right distance apart. Not only that, but it turned out that this had taken 10 uprights and I had a total of 20 to work with. Again, didn't do that deliberately, don't know how that happened. So then I just went back through and wove in the remaining 10 halfway between each upright. So then they were roughly 2 fingers distance apart. So to clarify, it was 20 uprights, about 1.5 feet long each, woven 1/2 foot randomly into the basket, about 2 fingers distance apart. Easy. Now it was time to actually weave the border. I wanted to make this up as I went along, so it meant a little bit of trial and error, with the first attempt ending up way too loose and just not working at all. Quick side note, I think this is where I started to lose my mind a little bit. I started to go insane with all the mistakes and getting lost within the blooming randomness of all the weave. Yeah, so after about an hour of playing, I decided to just pull it all apart and start again. Firstly, I used a 3-rod wale, where you take the weaver and you go in front of 2 and behind 1. I was working to my right, but you could do this to your left if you're left-handed. It's just what was easiest for me. Once I got almost all the way around, there were no uprights left, but a few that hadn't been woven in yet. For this and for other borders, you just need to imagine that the uprights are still sticking up in the air and follow the same pattern that you have been doing. Another thing to note is that for various reasons, while my right hand was weaving, the left hand was always either holding things in place or forcing them to fit where I wanted. Because if I wasn't doing that, it would just spring apart and would become loose. So just don't be afraid to bend and pull and tighten everything to your will. Using up as much of the material as I could, I continued around again with another weave. This one was in front of one, looped up and over, then behind one. So it came out sticking to the right of the current weaver sticking out of that hole. Hopefully that makes sense. After continuing this all the way around, minus the parts where I just kind of got lost and had to retrace steps and made mistakes, I decided to go round a second time with the same weave. So in front of one, looped over, then behind one. This time having the root sit snugly to the right of the previous looped weaver. After getting lost, making mistakes for the 3rd, 4th, 5th time, I was finished. All I had to do was trim everything up and we were done. So there we are. What do you think? I'm pretty pleased. Feels nice, fits quite snug. I mean, these straps are the charity shop belts that were on the other basket. These are just temporary. I am planning to make my own straps, as well as maybe a lid for the basket and maybe other accessories for the basket. However, that's for another video. So depending on when you're watching this video, the strap video part 2 may be ready. If it is, I'll let you watch that. Otherwise, thanks again everyone, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm being watched. I thought that was a person then. It's a fucking sheep. Just came over them, just like this. Just came up. Hey sheep. I agree.